spiritually awakened people are meant to do is they're meant to fulfill a purpose. They're set out to fulfill a certain divine task. It's like you can't fulfill that divine task if you're constantly getting pulled back into the way everybody else lives. So it's almost like you have to make a choice. Do you want to take the blue pill? Do you want to take the red pill? Right?
Hey everyone, this is Eric Qian, and you are listening to the Starlight Healing Podcast, the show that brings together people who are on their spiritual journeys. I hope you find a piece of yourself in me and my guest, and your heart can be soothed by what we share. In today's podcast, we welcome Mark Salazar. Mark is an entrepreneur and founder of the Conscious Journey LLC, and he's the host of the Narrow Path podcast, where he educates his audience on matters regarding purpose, spirituality, self-mastery, business, freedom, and wealth creation. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's jump right in. So what first sparked your interest in spirituality? What happened?
Well, in regards to spirituality, for me personally, it was definitely an evolution, and it wasn't something that kind of just came to me all at once. It was more so a constant realization as I progressed in life. And to give more context to this, I think I should give some background as to who I am.
Yeah.
I was born in the Philippines. I moved here in the US when I was 6 years old. I moved out of my parents' home when I was 19. And during this time I was in college. I was working a part-time job at Starbucks, and I was trying to balance living on my own, paying for a car, and also having to go to school, which was insanely rough on my on my mental. It took a lot of mental bandwidth to keep up with all of that. And I found myself at the crossroads when I was actually gonna drop out from college, and I felt like I got disowned by my parents. And I believe that was the first step in my journey towards spirituality, when I decided for myself that, okay, I'm going to move out of my parents' house, create something for myself, and then I'm going to make my own choices by dropping out of college. For me, that was the first catalyst. And I say this because growing up, I was kind of indoctrinated into this ready-made program, this path for myself. Something that my parents cultivated around their experiences of, fear, money problems, losing our house in the '08 crash. They had this path laid out for me, and I felt like that wasn't my path. And so as soon as I dropped out of college, I started getting into self-development. And what ended up happening is that at first I didn't really care too much about the spiritual practices. More so, I cared about how can I improve my quality of living. It started with working out. If I'm gonna be real with you, that was my first form of meditation, was going to the gym and pumping iron. For me, that was my way to let go of all the fear, the anxiousness, the stress, constant day-to-day living. Whatever problems I was dealing with, I took it to the gym. And the background behind me working out, it started as me just wanting to improve my health, me wanting to look better, feel better. But over time, I noticed that as I progressed in my workouts, my self-development journey, I came to the realization that no matter how buff you get, no matter how good you look, it's not enough, right? I feel like this starts with all men, as you know, we
Yeah.
kind of find that one thing, right, Eric? We find that one
Yeah.
thing and we're just like, okay, let's go do it. Let's go get as good as we can, and then we get as good as we can, and it's like, well, this isn't really making me that happy, or as happy as
Hmm.
I thought I would be. And so that was me when I started working out, and I wanted to search for more. I needed more in my life, and that's when I started really getting into spirituality.
And how old were you back then?
Let's see,
So,
so moved out. I would say as soon as I started getting better with my lifts and finding spirituality, that was when I turned 21. So 2 years after I had moved out.
yeah, that's the same as me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you moved out at 19, and did you go find a job somewhere, or what happened? And other than working out and realizing that wasn't enough.
During this time period, I was working at Starbucks, and when I dropped out of college, I decided to take on working full time for Starbucks as a barista. And before I turned 21, I was actually at this. I had already planned it for myself that I was going to be a bartender. I don't know why. Don't ask me. I always thought it was so cool to be flipping drinks and talking to a whole
Yeah.
bunch of people. Um, so that's kind of how I got into Starbucks. And as I progressed towards turning 21, I got myself in the restaurant industry. I started working two jobs, one in the restaurant industry, one at Starbucks. And then, as I kept progressing, I decided to just fully immerse myself in the restaurant industry as a waiter, and working two different restaurant jobs just to pay for my car, to pay for my rent, to pay for all of my bills, because that's kind of what it takes here in California. And until I turned 21, that's when I finally got myself in the bartending position as soon as I turned 21.
Another question I have for you, how have your beliefs and practices changed over time along your journey?
In regards to my beliefs, I would say when I first got into spirituality, I was kind of open ended. It was more Eastern spirituality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of finding our own inner power, our inner
Yeah.
being, just kind of exploring within that
Yeah.
realm. That's how I started. And I would say it got really deep when I started to go on trips, taking
Yeah.
psychedelics, removing myself from the same old thought patterns that I would live life going through. And that's when I really delved into meditation, um, different forms of like how to cultivate your energy, right? Masculine and feminine energy, how to harness sexual energy.
Hmm.
And those were my beginning practices, my beginning beliefs. Um, and they've changed over time because now, coming from Eastern, what's it called? Eastern spiritual practices, I've transitioned over to more Western, more in a sense Christian
Yeah.
beliefs and practices. And I this transition happened because for me personally, with Eastern spirituality, it's very open ended, and you can pretty much go as far as you want to. But with like Western and Christianity and the Holy Bible, it's like very grounded, very based. You have a basic set of rules, the Ten Commandments that you're supposed to abide by, right? You're pretty much told in the Holy Bible, you're pretty much dirt, right?
Yeah.
And in Eastern spirituality, you're like your inner God, right? Your inner being. And
Hmm.
with Christianity and the Holy Bible, you're dirt. You gotta go build, brother.
Yeah.
So for me, the Holy Bible and Christianity, which is what I practice now, being
Hmm.
a follower of Christ, it gave me a more base foundation to build upon what I've kind of learned from Eastern spirituality, and it's allowed me to pretty much go further into the path that I'm currently on, which is
Yeah.
entrepreneurship and tying spirituality and the experiences that I've learned over time into that.
Now, were you raised religious? What was your background growing up?
That's a great question. I actually was kind of forced into a religion.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Iglesia ni Cristo, which
Mm-hmm.
is basically just the Filipino Church of Christ.
Okay. How does
And
that affect you?
for me personally, like I was not ready for it.
Yeah.
The only reason I had to kind of partake was growing up. My parents weren't able to take care of me and my brothers all at the same time. They obviously had to work full time.
Mm-hmm.
So during the weekdays, I would stay with my auntie, and my auntie and her family were very heavy into the religion. Um, and they kind of saw fit to kind of just take me in to that religion, even though it's like I really had no say. Even though I didn't want to go, even though I didn't really believe, I still had to learn. I still had to get baptized in the religion, and I had to, go to church twice a week. And that was when I was in middle school up until high school. And it really shifted my perspective when I graduated and I moved out, that my auntie who was in that religion, they had some sort of disagreement within the church. They found out some really corrupt things, and they ended up getting excommunicated when they tried to shed that into light.
How did that affect you?
Yeah, that made me look at certain religions in a different light. It kind of opened
Mm-hmm.
my eyes to, like, okay, like I knew all along that it never resonated with me. Even though I didn't know what it was, like I knew that it wasn't me. And
Mm-hmm.
so now I'm very careful when I say, like, oh, I'm practicing a religion, whereas um no, it's just my spirituality, right? I'm not practicing a religion. Is more so like a basic, like, rules, and like, okay,
Yeah.
you need to do this and you need to do that, whereas spirituality is like, that's like what you believe, like that
Yeah.
is you seeking
You're on your
truth.
own.
Yeah, pretty much.
What's the first spiritual book that you read that was inspiring?
So it was the Way of the Superior Man by
The Way
David
of the
Deida.
Superior Man. Okay.
Yeah. And it sounds really cliche, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this book, it not only goes into masculine and feminine energies, but it goes into deeper teachings about our masculine essence that I wish would get taught to us when we were younger. It really helped me to understand, okay, this is why I feel this way as a man, right?
Yeah.
As men, we need purpose, right? We
Mm-hmm.
need we need a reason for living. We need a mission. And if we don't have this mission, we're kind of just aimlessly going about life and we have no direction.
Yeah.
I didn't know that before I read this book, and as soon as I read it, it was like, that makes so much sense. Like, growing up, we're kind of K through 12, we're tossed in this system, right? We're led down this path and we have a direction, but it wasn't our direction. It transitions into college, we have to
Mm-hmm.
go get a degree, we still have that direction. But what happens if you leave? What happens if you try to carve your own direction? Well, you have no clarity. You don't
Yeah.
have a single idea of where you're going. And that's where having a mission, having a purpose, having a, to tie this in, having someone or something divine to look to, because as humans, we're flawed.
Yeah.
We can't rely on each other and our own intuition. That's why it's important to have a relationship with God. Something that I go over in, my videos and my
Yeah.
podcasts with my audience. I tell them all the time that cultivating this relationship with God, creator, the universe, whatever you guys want to refer to divinity as, it helps guide us in the path that we're on, because now we have divinity to look to in terms of guidance. We don't have to just rely on our lack of knowledge.
I have two questions. So, first of all, what do you mean when you say God? Obviously, we kind of are referring to different things if you're talking about religion and spirituality,
Hmm.
or the same thing, depending on your perspective. But first of all, what's your definition or experience of God? And how do you cultivate your relationship with God as a practice in your daily life?
Yeah, great question, Eric. My definition of God is to be quite uh, just simple with it: infinite intelligence, right? The creator of this whole universe is what I would put into terms of God. But it's
Mhm.
like I alone cannot even define God. Because if I were to define God, I would be putting him in a box, right? And God is limitless. He doesn't have any boundaries. He's all knowing, all loving, all just. Um, and he lives through all of us. And he's out there everywhere. That's kind of the simplest definition that I can put in for
Yeah,
God. But
yeah,
yeah, I don't believe that he belongs to any one religion, or, you know what I mean? Like he's kind of, um, and I refer to God as he, as divine masculine, but there's no gender for God, obviously. Um, yeah, there's really just no right or wrong definition for God, as long as
yeah,
you kind of have that relationship with the creator. You kind of
yeah,
start to understand, like, I can't really define you.
yeah,
You just are.
yeah, yeah, definitely. That's my experience as well.
Yeah.
So, how do you practice integrating that into your daily life, cultivating that connection with God?
Prayer is
Right?
the number one thing that allows me to integrate that aspect into my life. And this isn't just like like I'm saying the same old monotonous things every day. It's more so me taking the time to really connect with God. Like, tell him about what's been going on, what I plan on doing, what's troubling me, what's worrying me, what am I, you know, what am I dealing with at the current time period of my life. And it wasn't like that before, but as I started to educate myself on the truth and reading the Holy Bible, it's come to the point where I almost just I allow God to just work and speak through me. And it's really it could be very this can go over a lot of people's heads, so I want to kind
Hmm.
of reiterate this. As humans, and to give more context to this, as humans, we all have egos. We all have this identity construct that dictates how we should act, how we should feel, based on our experiences, other people's experiences that have been posed on us, right? What we think our strengths and weaknesses are. And it's all tied to our name as well, what we think we are. And as humans, we also all have a soul. And this soul is what is tied to God. So you can either choose to operate your day-to-day life operating from the command of your ego, or you can allow God to work through you and let your soul take the steering wheel. And the difference between these two is, well, our ego always has thoughts and different beliefs that are shouting in our head day in, day out, whereas the soul doesn't have any of that. It just is. There's no there's no worrying, there's no anxiety, there's no thoughts that aren't yours, um, there's no fear. You just are in that moment. And for me, whenever I integrate God into my life, it's really a matter of, well, how do I want to operate in this life? What level of consciousness do I want to operate from? Do I want to operate from my lower levels of consciousness, which is basic survival instincts, like what the ego is hardwired to operate from, or do I want to operate from my soul, which is more higher levels of consciousness going along the lines of love, enlightenment, and joy?
What are your top three teachers or books?
If I were to name the top three, um, I would go based off of the first one being Jesus Christ. The second one, I would say the one that's influenced me the most right now is actually Jeremy Griffin.
Yeah.
The third one, I would say it's another man that has a channel, but his name is David Hammond. He has his own channel, which is called the Self Developed Army. And yeah, those are the three teachers that I would just right off the bat in terms of spirituality that have impacted my life and allowed me to pretty much cultivate what I have now.
Have you had any significant spiritual experiences that have transformed your understanding of the world and understanding of yourself?
The most recent shroom trip that I went on has definitely opened my eyes to the possibilities of what really this life has to offer. And I say this because I went on this hike. I took my girlfriend as well. And it was it wasn't anything crazy. We just took some shrooms, and there was this beach and this cliff that was overlooking the water. And when I was, under the trip, I was looking at the water and kind of looking into the heavens, and I started seeing geometrical patterns
Yeah.
within the heavens.
Yeah.
And I also, as I looked at the water, I would see just like like almost an infinite view of the water. And like I said, it's nothing crazy, but it started really opening my mind up to how this life works. Time dissipated, right? Because time technically doesn't even exist. I started feeling an infinite amount of love radiating from within myself. And on other hikers, I started seeing resemblances of Adam and Eve. My girlfriend even saw that as well, like the masculine and feminine energies. I started getting really in tune with my ancestry. Every walk and step that I took on that hike, I felt as though my ancestors were also taking that step with me. I felt very connected to nature. As I looked at the trees and as I touched the trees, it was like they were welcoming me, making sure that I am a part of them, right? Or one of them, rather. And when I finished the hike, I had to take my girlfriend back to the car halfway in the hike, and I actually ended up going on the hike by myself, and it was about an hour and a half. I finished the hike by myself, and when I got to the end, the biggest realization that came to me was that we have all the time in the world to fulfill whatever it is that we have to fulfill on earth, whatever that is for each
Hmm.
individual's souls, right?
Yeah.
Before I took it, it was like always felt rushed. I always felt like I needed to go, like I needed to make it happen. But then when I took the time to just stare at the water, to just stare into the infinite unknown, I felt again that overwhelming feeling of love and having all the time in the world, not needing to be rushed, just being.
You've talked about having a sense of purpose and mission. What does that mean for you?
In regards to my mission and purpose, I've this is something that I've had to pretty much clarify as I've gone on this journey. Um, I believe I've been making YouTube videos for going on about to be 3 years now. And at first, I didn't know what it was. I just knew I wanted to spread positivity. I just wanted to carve a different path for similar beings like myself. And as I've gotten older and lived life and continued on this spiritual path, it's been made more clear to me by God that my sole purpose on this earth is to guide the chosen ones, to live and experience life as a highly spiritual and conscious being. And with the experiences that I've gathered and the knowledge that I've taken the time to seek out, it's my duty to bring this information, this knowledge, and this guidance towards others that are like me, like the chosen ones, the ones that are set apart from their families, the ones that can't fit in, the ones that have social anxiety but they still have to perform, the ones that don't know what their place in the system or the matrix is, the ones that have a vision but don't know how to bring that vision into reality. I believe it is my purpose to guide those individuals.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And how do you make sense of awakening at an early age when you look around you? And then I'd say most people that are our age, are still, I don't want to say deep in the matrix, but perhaps we can use the word unaware.
It definitely has its pros and cons. And I believe it was meant to be. That's the first thing. It's kind of something we just have to accept. I knew from a young age I was different. The reason I felt this way is because, when you move to the States and your first language isn't English and, you're thrown into the school system and you have to socialize with other kids, it's like, but you don't know how to because you don't know how to communicate. It's like you're kind of already on a different wavelength, right?
Yeah.
These, you know what I'm saying? It's like for the ones that wake up early in their journey, I would guess that a lot of these people and these kids were the ones that never fit in with their group, their societal group. And the reason being is not because of your circumstances, but because of your energy. The way you see the world is just completely different. Like, for example, the unaware, right? The ones that were unaware that I grew up with, they were always deep in the social media matrix, and they were always worried about what to post on social media. And I'm speaking like from middle school to high school, by the way. They were always worried about these, these different things that was like that were like that didn't matter to me, right? I was more worried about like what is the truth of life, type deals. Like
Yeah.
I'm over here like really asking myself questions that can't be answered by the ones around me. And I believe that's the curse of the fact that if you're going to awaken early, it's like you're kind of just go around this rabbit hole about what is truth, what is the meaning of life. But the ones around you are just so caught up in living their life that they don't zoom out far enough to understand and look at all of the different ways that we're all connected.
What has changed in your relationship with friends and families since your awakening?
It's definitely not been easy. And that's why I kind of, in my last statement, I prefaced how it's kind of like you don't fit in. That's really just how it is. Like you don't fit in with anybody. The relationship that I've had with family, old friends, they've just fallen apart completely. Not for the reason of like I'm like I don't want to make friends or I don't want to have family. It's really not that. It's more so we can't agree on things. And in order for the ones that are spiritually awakened to continue serving their mission, their purpose, because that's what I believe that spiritually awakened people are meant to do, is they're meant to fulfill a purpose. They're set out to fulfill a certain divine task. It's like you can't fulfill that divine task if you're constantly getting pulled back into the way everybody else lives. So it's almost like you have to make a choice. Do you want to take the blue pill or do you want to take the red pill, right? But if you go down this rabbit hole even further and you understand exactly what your purpose is, then it's not even a question which one you should take. And the cost to that is just having to be separated from a lot of these people. It's a lonely journey, Eric, and I'm sure you can,
Hmm.
you can kind of
Yeah.
relate to this. It's a very lonely journey. There's not a lot of us out there, but we're out there.
Yeah. We found each other here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So speaking of loneliness, how do you experience the loneliness and how do you deal with loneliness in your life? And how has that progressed throughout your journey?
Yeah, at first it was something that I definitely had to get used to. I believe that as I was growing up, I've always been independent. I've always been the type to do my own thing, and this kind of from childhood, I was always doing mischievous things like sneaking out at night, and um, I wouldn't have my parents pick me up from school. Like I would always walk to and from school, even though it was like an hour away. Um, I would always be out late at night, and this translated into my adult life, where at first it was like I'm independent and I want to do my own thing, but now it's like, okay, well, you're kind of cutting off your spiritual ties to a whole lot of people because you can't afford to be influenced by certain lower levels of thinking. And so it's kind of like going deeper. Like at first you were physically alone, now you're spiritually and energetically alone, right?
Mhm.
So that type of loneliness is deep, and it'll cut through any form of, I would say it would, you would feel that on a very energetic level in um, the way you move in life. And right now I have a girlfriend, and at first it was hard for me to juggle being independent and having to do my own thing with building this relationship that I have with her. I was at a point in my life where I was going monk mode, which is no social media, no caffeine, no alcohol, no weed, no drugs, no sex, nothing. Just full on focus and do what you need to do. I did this for, I want to say, 2 months. And during this 2 month period, I would cut off my connection with my girlfriend. And right around this time, she was the only person that I was talking to. Like, I have a very small social circle. I don't have many people that I talk to on a day to day basis. If anything, it's just one or two people,
Yeah.
if any, during that day. So during this time, I would cut off my connection of speaking, even on the phone, texting, calling, for a week, 2 weeks. And this allowed me to just spend more time with God. Because when you're alone, you're not truly alone. You're alone with God.
Yeah.
You're alone with the universe. And most people would actually be afraid of being by themselves. Because what happens when you're by yourself? Well, your thoughts start to come up, right? The thoughts that
Yeah.
aren't yours. The ego
Yeah.
tries to make sense of why you're alone. As, social beings, it's kind of terrifying to be alone, because the way we, evolved over time from our ancestors to now is we, to be alone out of the pack was synonymous with death. So whenever we're alone, it feels like, we're about to die. I purposely took myself on a hike by myself. It was like a 3 hour drive away. And I just spent time with God. And what that allowed me to do was it gave me so much clarity in terms of the mission, in terms of the path, in terms of the content that I was to make, in terms of how I was going to supplement my life, how I was going to impact the lives of other people.
Yeah.
All of these ideas came from being alone. Most people, when they're alone, they focus on the fear aspect, the lower levels of thinking. But we all have this ability to transcend that, to move beyond just lower levels of thinking and tuning into, again, infinite intelligence. Because the source of ideas that we can gain from infinite intelligence is, it's limitless. And that's what I've obtained in regards to dealing with loneliness. Like it was at first, it was like a scary thing, relationship problems, personal problems, all these different things coming up. But when you can get past that, that's where the magic lies in.
Yeah, I really resonate with you on that, Mark, because I have been basically having zero social life for about a month or two now, and there is really a deep sense of connection that you can develop with God in loneliness. It's not really as scary as what ego would make if you were to stay alone. There's actually a sense of, there's actually a deeper sense of connection with God that automatically sort of surfaces. And so, for those of you guys who are feeling you're lonely on the journey, Mark and I have shared our perspective on it. My suggestion would just to be go into the depth of the loneliness and see if it's actually true to those who are on their journey and that are feeling they're alone and feeling that, they need more connections in their life. Mark, what advice would you give them?
One word: surrender.
Beautiful, beautiful, brother. That's beautiful. Mark, what was the most challenging period that you went through after your awakening?
The most challenging thing that I went through after my awakening, hands down, was having to deal with all of these downloads and how to integrate them into my being. Because when you get downloads from God and you're kind of given a vision of how you're meant to live this life, but it goes against what you thought you were supposed to live your life as, and what goes against how others perceive you. It's like now you're really going against the grain.
Yeah.
Really having to speak my truth was the biggest aspect for me. And I say this because when I came to the US, I was socially awkward. Eric, I was that kid in middle school who had nobody to sit at lunch with. I instead, when it came lunchtime, dude, I would just go to my next classroom and sit next to the door. I had nobody to talk to, and that was me growing up as a young adult, as a child. And as I progressed in life and I started making friends, it was like, okay, now I kind of felt that bond. But now that I'm in my young adult life and I'm spiritually awakened, and I believe that I still have more evolutions to go through, but at this stage currently, it's like I had to remove that comfortability that I felt of being connected to certain people, because I realized that the mission and the purpose that I have to fulfill will not be fulfilled if I continue to just stay comfortable. If I continue to live life how I think I should instead of living life how God wants me to, how God designed me to. And so that was the hardest part, really integrating that into my life, speaking my truth, not being afraid to be who I am, and also putting the message out to others, but not coming from a place of my ego, but coming from a place of love and from just allowing God to speak and work through me.
How has starting a channel influenced you in your journey?
It's allowed me to really get uncomfortable. When I first started, of course, we're all awkward. It's like
Yeah.
you turn on the record button, it's like, all right, well, hey everyone. And you just start thinking about like how people are going to think about you while you're on camera,
Yeah.
and it doesn't allow for you to be who you are. And as I've done that going on 3 years now, it's gotten to the point where now whenever I turn on the camera and I'm going to speak, it's almost as if I'm speaking to the rest of the world, and I can just be who I am. I don't need to try to be someone I'm not. And it took a lot of work, a lot of healing, a lot of shadow work, a lot of going outside of my ego to get to this point. But the biggest recommendation that I can have for young entrepreneurs, especially spiritually awakened individuals that have a purpose, is to build something for yourself. Build a personal brand. Put your message out there and always believe in what you are and what you do, because if you can cultivate that for yourself, then that's when you can use content creation or building a channel as a vehicle for fulfilling your purpose. Kind of what Jesus and Noah did, right? Jesus, he just went on a whole bunch of sermons, healed people, and got a following and spread his message. Noah, he built a boat to bring in certain animals, certain people in that listened to him about an impending doom. They all had vehicles to get them there, right? Whatever your boat is, build it and use it. And that's how I see my channel as, just a boat.
Yeah. So we're at the end of our podcast. Is there anything that you would like to share about your spiritual journey that we haven't touched on?
I would say, in regards to the spiritual journey, don't get too attached to how you are now. When you're on this path, you pretty much understand that it's an ever evolving journey, and there's no set destination for the spiritual journey. That's why it's called the journey. And you really just have to take the time to appreciate what you have in life, because I mean, if you look back 5 years ago, look how far you've gotten now. It's so easy for us to get caught in the day-to-day, doing what we need to do every single day, every single week, every single month to go after what we want. But it's really hard for us to appreciate what we already have, which is the breath in our lungs, right? The life that we have, the food, the clothes, the shelter. And the only reason I can speak about these certain things is because I've been put in certain positions in my life where I've almost had my life taken from me. I've gone hungry multiple times, especially coming from the Philippines. Housing has been taken away. I've almost gone homeless multiple times, living on my own. So for me, it's really natural for me to appreciate what I have, that is pretty much what we should all have, right? But it takes a point in your life where that gets taken away from you, that you're like, oh, well, really nice to have that right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, that's why I believe I was given this mission, is because I was blessed with these experiences. And yes, they're all blessings, because they allowed me to be who I am now and to have the message that I have. And really, that's the one thing that I would share with you guys that is crucial to the spiritual journey. Just appreciate what you have and be in the present moment as much as you can.
Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate you coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, brother. It's been
All
a
the
blessing.
best. Peace and love.
Yes, sir. Peace and love.